Hello, I'm Susan Black. In this episode of Joseph, my colleagues from Brigham Young University, along with scholars from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, will continue to explore the life of the prophet Joseph Smith. We will examine the founding of Nauvoo, the building of the temple, the establishment of the Relief Society, and the tragic events at Carthage, the years 1839 to 1844, on this episode of Joseph. Having been expelled from the state of Missouri, the Saints found refuge across the Mississippi River in Quincy, Illinois. After spending several months in the dark confines of Liberty Jail, Joseph escaped and reunited with his family in Quincy. In that small river town, the Saints enjoyed the simple love and brotherly kindness they had been denied for years in Ohio and Missouri. But for Joseph, his desire was to build a city, a gathering place for the saints, a light unto the world. In the summer of 1839, after negotiating to purchase property near the Mississippi River in Illinois and Iowa, Joseph and the saints began the difficult process of building a city unto God.
The heart of the land purchase was a place around Commerce, a little tiny 3 or 4 cabin location. And the Saints bought land there and had to work with the lowlands, which were swampy, and carve streets into the prairie land and develop a community which by the end of 1839 was being called Nauvoo, which Joseph said is Hebrew for city beautiful.
This was a mud flat land at the bottom and hills and bluffs behind. It was a pretty undesirable place because of the swampy conditions, not a particularly attractive place, but they wanted a place for themselves and set about the task of almost immediately of draining the swampland. And one of the results of this undesirable condition, as well as their own poor physical condition and the deprivation they had suffered in Missouri, led to serious illness, including fever and ague and even malaria. And this in turn led to one of the best documented cases of faith healing in all of Mormon history.
By the summer of 1839, Joseph Smith and Emma were nursing a multitude of Latter-day Saints. In fact, their home became somewhat of a hospital where Joseph and Emma tried to nurse the Latter-day Saints gathered there. In time, Joseph too became sick and was stricken with cholera in his bed. Known, according to Wilford Woodruff, as the day of God's great power, Joseph Smith rose from his sickbed and decided to go and heal the saints gathered not only in his own yard, but scattered throughout the streets of Nauvoo.
He walked into the cabin where I was lying sick, and commanded me in the name of Jesus Christ to arise and be made whole. I arose and was healed, and followed him and the brethren of the 12.
I was with President Joseph Smith and his council on the 12. It was a day of God's power with the prophet. He healed many who were sick, nigh unto death. Even the wicked rabble followed to see the sick healed. As Joseph was about to cross the river, a man came to him and asked him if he would go about 3 miles and heal 2 of his small children, who were twins, about 3 months old, and were sick nigh unto death. He was a man of the world. He had never heard a sermon preached by a Latter-day Saint. Joseph said he could not go, but he would send a man. After hesitating a moment, he turned to me and said, "You go with this man and heal his children," at the same time giving me a red silk handkerchief, and said, "After you lay hands upon them, wipe their faces with it, and they shall be healed. And as long as you will keep that handkerchief, it shall ever remain as a league between you and me. I went and did as I was commanded, and the children were healed.
While Joseph Smith was languishing in Liberty Jail in Missouri, in March of 1839, he received 3 revelations, sections 121, 122, and 123. We always note sections 121 and 122 because they're so beautiful and poetic and poignant. But section 123 is a remarkable revelation in and of itself. In that revelation, Joseph Smith instructed the members of the church then in Quincy to write out and bear testimony concerning some of the problems they experienced in Missouri while living in the Missouri region. Joseph Smith further indicated that those affidavits, or petitions we call them, were so important that he wanted to take those to Washington, D.C. to present them before the heads of the government. After leaving Liberty Jail in Missouri, Joseph Smith got settled in what is today Nauvoo, Illinois. And that fall, he wasted no time. That fall, he decided he was going to be gone for some time so he could go back to Washington, D.C. and there present these affidavits before the heads of the federal government.
When Joseph and Elias Higbee were on the outskirts of Washington, D.C., he became involved in an act of bravery that was as exciting as anything you could see in an action-packed cowboy movie. They were driving in a stage. The driver got off the stage to get a drink. The horses became frightened and ran full speed down the hill. The passengers became terrified. Joseph Smith tried to calm the passengers. There was one lady that even tried to throw her baby out the window. After he calmed the passengers, he opened the door, climbed up the side of the stage, made his way to the driver's seat, somehow got a hold of the reins, pulled the horses to a halt. Some of the passengers were members of the United States Congress and said that they wanted to publicly praise his name in a congressional session. But after Joseph Smith told them his name and that he was the Mormon prophet, he said he heard no more about public praise or reward.
And Joseph arrives in Washington late in January or early February, and almost the very next day, unexpectedly, he gets an audience with the President of the United States, who knew that Joseph was coming. And Van Buren is a little bit suspect of the Latter-day Saints when he listens to Joseph's petitions. And so Joseph is left with no response. And so he asks Elias Higbee, who was his assistant, to draw up a petition to give to Congress.
For ourselves, we see no redress unless it is awarded by the Congress of the United States. And there we make our appeal as American citizens, as Christians, and as men, believing that the high sense of justice which exists in your honorable bodies will not allow such oppression to be practiced upon any portion of the citizens of this vast republic with impunity.
And then he met a second time with President Martin Van Buren. On this occasion, Martin Van Buren made his infamous statement, "Your cause is just, but I cannot help you. If I come to your aid, I will lose the vote of the state of Missouri." Joseph Smith was so upset that on his way back to Nauvoo, he didn't campaign for anybody for President of the United States, but he campaigned against Martin Van Buren. On one occasion, he made the statement, "May he never be elected to an office of power or trust again." And that was fulfilled. Martin Van Buren did not win that election, and 4 years later he even ran on the platform of the Free Soil Party, and he lost that election as well. After Joseph Smith visited in Washington, D.C., he came away with the feeling that the federal government would not help the church, and if the church was to be helped, they were going to have to help themselves.
Failing to gain redress from the federal government, Joseph turned his efforts to building a community on the Mississippi River. The city of Nauvoo was remarkable in its time. Through hard work, Latter-day Saints transformed the mosquito-infested swampland into a beautiful place that became one of the largest cities in Illinois, rivaling even Chicago in size. With the establishment of Nauvoo, the Latter-day Saints had a home and new converts had a place to gather.
People who were religious refugees, people from England who were new immigrants, arrived with their skills